Live from Millvale, it's Friday morning, the final Friday of March, second to last day of March. We are rapidly moving on to the busiest time of the sports calendar. No better time to sit down and chat with me, I would say, here on my vanity project. Welcome to it. This is Gike's Got Game on the River's Edge, and you can find us at riversedgepgh.com. In fact, you may have already found us there. If not, you're likely stumbling upon the Facebook Live feed, which we roll with every Friday from 10 to 11. This is my show. I do what I want with it, so deal with it. If you don't like it, I guess you could always find something else. But I have been encouraged by the feedback I've gotten on the program as we've gone over the past almost 3 full years here on this show. We've gone through several evolutions, a couple of different homes as we moved up the hill here in Millvale from the Millvale studios to Mr. Small's Theater. Tyler Zelenko is alongside. You see him if you're watching on the live video feed. Proud native of Burgettstown. I'm from just down the road, in fact, in Weirton, West Virginia. Although I've always felt like Pittsburgh was my spiritual home. I was born here right across the river and so happy to be back in the area, living in the North Hills and just close enough to Millvale. And in fact, I did check out some of the local businesses in Millvale yesterday, having a drink or two down at Strange Roots Brewing right by the river. So plenty of things to see in Millvale. I feel like I don't promote Millvale enough on this show. You hear all the time about Lawrenceville and whatnot, but Millvale is an awesome spot as well. Anyway, coming up later in this hour, this is ostensibly a sports talk show after all. I will play Pirates Perception versus Reality on what is a take 2 of an opening day for the Buccos up in Detroit. You see I'm wearing my Bob Prince Chicken on the Hill t-shirt in homage to Willie Stargell and the Pirates of yesteryear. Yeah, when you talk Buccos, it is mostly about history, but what about this present version of the team? Most folks down on them for good reason, and for many reasons. But I'll discuss with Alan Saunders, my teammate at PiratesProspects.com, whether the pessimism is warranted. He spoke to some folks in the clubhouse. Of course, they feel better about it than those of us on the outside, or most of us on the outside. But Alan's paid to split the difference there and tell us what he thinks is real. I'll welcome him on the show at 10:20. Also, later in the program, are you offended when teams like, I don't know, the local Stanley Cup champions, the Pittsburgh Penguins, when they or other teams or other athletes even confess to saying they didn't bring their best and they weren't mentally focused? Does that bother you? Does that offend you as a sports fan? We'll get into all that a little bit later in this hour. Also, I'll kill another cliche, bringing that one on back for the conclusion of the show. But to start today's program, and once again, thank you for joining me. I don't know if you checked out that Sidney Crosby goal last night. No, not the one from a week ago where he batted it to himself in what was almost like a soccer goal, a double volley goal it was called, in fact, on an Australian website. That one was really impressive, but I think last night in New Jersey, in overtime, number 87 may have topped himself with that goal where he soared down the left wing, wrung a shot off the post, and then batted in his own rebound from about 15 feet in front of the net before Jersey goalie Keith Kincaid could even flinch in one direction or another. It got me off the couch, I know that, and it doesn't take much from Crosby to trigger the fan instincts in my mind, but I'm thinking, that's spectacular. That's maybe the best goal of his career. It's right up there, and we've said it 2 or 3 times. He also had a nice running the gauntlet slalom-style goal against the Flyers on Sunday, but that was more traditional. Crosby's getting sick of scoring goals when the puck's on the ice. He has been doing insane work when the puck is elevated, and you might remember in the aftermath of the first Stanley Cup of this era, back in 2009, the Penguins visited PNC Park. And this fits very much with this crossover sports season when baseball gets into the picture here, when it butts in and takes its share of everyone's sporting headspace. But you might recall Crosby hitting a home run at batting practice at PNC Park, launching one over the Clemente wall as a left-handed hitter, as you might imagine, being a left-handed shooter on the ice. And Sid played quite a bit of baseball up in Nova Scotia when he was a kid. Of course, he devoted most of his time after, say, age 10 or 12 to hockey, and I think it was a wise choice as he's risen to the top of his profession, and he's kept that spot for about 10 or 12 years. But I digress. Crosby can play baseball, at least on that rudimentary level, batting practice level. I think, though, it wouldn't take him that long to transition to maybe even just being a bench player in Major League Baseball. His hand-eye coordination is that good, and he is that good of an athlete overall that I think baseball would be a great fit for him. And I don't think it's hyperbole. Last night you saw on social media after the goal, after the baseball-style goal, the walk-off, if you will, on opening day across Major League Baseball. Crosby capped it off. You did see across social media that, oh yeah, Crosby could hit fifth for the Pirates. He could play shortstop or second base. I don't actually think that's that far from the truth. I believe there was tongue firmly planted in cheek for many of you, if not all of you, who were saying those things. I don't think it's out of the ordinary at all, or out of the realm of possibility, I should say, at all, for Crosby to be able to do something like that. I think that highly of him as an athlete. And as you might remember from when he was going through his concussion ordeal in 2010 and 11, there was a Dr. Ted Carrick who discussed Crosby at a press conference, and as he was trying to recalibrate Sid's brain and figure out his vestibular system, which means how you keep your equilibrium as a human being when you turn your head left and right. That's what was giving Crosby the most trouble. But this Dr. Carrick, who Sid still swears by to this day, called Crosby a Ferrari. Sidney Crosby is a Ferrari, he said, and it makes a lot of sense. His internal processor, if we want to use a computing term, operates at a few clicks faster than most of ours. And I don't think there's any disputing that. When you see him adjust to that puck in the air, he can't be expecting that shot to come off the post, but he does. He reacts, and he knocks it in when it really handcuffs him. And you have to go on social media and watch it or find it on NHL.com. You can find that goal no matter where you might be online today. It's all over the place, and for good reason. Right up there with any of the goals he's scored in his career, regular season or playoffs. Doesn't matter the importance of the game. And it was actually a pretty important game for the Penguins to get their game together against a really staunch Devils team that's coming on late in the season. So it had it all. Sudden death, overtime, against a good team, on the road, silencing the crowd, and also getting some vengeance for Travis Zajac of the Devils, butt-ending him in the ribs a few minutes before that really pissed Crosby off, and maybe it gave him a little extra starch for that overtime rush. We'll never know about that. But all this has led me to thinking, besides Crosby, who I think is at the top of this list, Crosby the baseball would be my first thought on this subject. But who is your Pittsburgh athlete who would have the most success crossing over to another sport that we play here in town? I'll even include the Riverhounds on this too, since they open this weekend. And by the way, I'm back on the call for the Hounds on Pittsburgh CW Saturday at 7 o'clock against the hated Penn FC. More on that later, but I thought I'd toss that one in. But I say that because I think there are some athletes who play soccer pretty well in the city of Pittsburgh. Maybe Crosby chiefly among them. We've seen him kick pucks to his stick in such deft fashion. I don't think there's any dispute he'd be a pretty decent soccer player as well, with the cardio fitness that he has, with the explosiveness that he has. Yeah, I could see him as being a box-to-box midfielder, much like he's a 200-foot center in the sport of hockey. But I look at other teams here in town. I look at the Pirates. I look at the Steelers. The Steelers seem to have maybe the most guys who I would feel comfortable putting them in other sports. For instance, Antonio Brown. It doesn't take much to think of him as a center fielder, a guy who roams the wide open spaces, much like he does on the NFL playing fields, or maybe even at shortstop. Antonio Brown has also shown, much like most elite receivers, some great feet, so he could play soccer too. I don't think there's any stretch of the imagination that it would take for you to put Brown on the field with the Riverhounds and possibly dominate in certain spots, being like a striker, like a Romeo Parks type striker, if you want to use a current Hound as a comparison point there. How about Matt Murray, the Penguins goaltender, as a catcher? Goaltending and catching, they're like a brotherhood anyway, right? With the equipment that they wear, with their goal of stopping implements fired at them at high rates of speed, upwards of 100 miles an hour sometimes. Yes, goalies are in a different category because they're facing opposition shots, whereas catchers are working with the pitcher. So there is a difference there, but there's a lot of the same skills. And when you see, say, Francisco Cervelli of the Pirates go down into both knees to block a pitch in the dirt, looks a lot like a butterfly position for a hockey goaltender, does it not? So yeah, Cervelli to hockey, Murray to baseball in that way. Those are easy ones too. Maybe even you could call that cheating in that way. How about Jamie Alexiak, the Penguins' 6'7" defenseman as a tight end in football? I could see that really easily. I could also see him as a soccer goalie. He could certainly pick off some of those crosses and make life easier for his back line. No doubt about that. And, Alexiak has, you could say this, crossover genes in his family. His sister Penny was a gold medal winning swimmer in the previous Olympic Games, the previous Summer Olympic Games for Team Canada. So he could just go upon his sister's experience and draw upon that to figure out how to cross it over. So if you're looking at practicalities there, that's a way that could clear the path for Alexiak to go across sports. Anyway, let me know what you think on Twitter or Facebook. You can find me at Matt Gajtka, MattGajTKA. Matt Gajtka Media is the name on Facebook, in fact, and that's where we are streaming Gike's Got Game for the umpteenth consecutive week, and for my second straight week back in studio after a trip to Bradenton to cover Pirate spring training. Well, speaking of baseball, could Gregory Polanco of the Pirates go elsewhere? I don't have to squint too much to see him as a puck possession center in the Riley Cheyenne mold with those long legs and arms. Boy, could he ever protect the puck if Polanco grew up ice skating as opposed to roaming the fields of the Dominican Republic, or a defenseman. He definitely packs a punch. We've talked about, I know I have with fellow folks on the Pirates beat over the years, that Polanco kind of looks like a tight end in football too, maybe even an offensive lineman or an offensive tackle. Yet you have to put some weight on for that position for offensive line, which may not really have an analog in other sports because of the amount of weight you have to put on. You couldn't really carry that around a hockey rink or a soccer field, or even maybe a baseball field, a huge first baseman. That could be a fit, but sorry to the offensive lineman and maybe even the defensive lineman of the Steelers. I'm not sure there's a fit for you in other sports. However, the other way goes, Polanco, you put on some weight at 6'5", yeah, he could protect the quarterback, I think, or he could even play quarterback with the arm that he has. Remember that Polanco came up as a pitcher in the Dominican Republic before he was moved to the outfield by a former Pirates Latin American scouting director, Rene Gallo. Turned out to be a pretty nice move there by Rene, an instinctual idea that panned out down the line. And speaking of Pirates outfielders, there may be no better arm on the team. In fact, I'm fairly sure of that when it comes to the position players than Starling Marte, who's going to be your starting center fielder today if they play the opening day game at Detroit. But Marte could be a quarterback too. Maybe he doesn't have the height of a Polanco. That's why I feel better about Polanco being a lefty slinger in the pocket. But there's a thought for Marte. He could be a running type quarterback. He could be like a college type guy who maybe tries to translate his game to the NFL. And we've seen mixed levels of success with that. But you're telling me he wouldn't be a threat to run or pass? Yeah, Starling Marte could qualify for that. And just to close it out, how about the Riverhounds' Kevin Kerr? He has been an excellent, tireless worker for them, with also a pretty darn good touch around the penalty area, around the box. I could see him as being a winger in hockey just because of his work rate. I think Mike Sullivan would love to have Kevin Kerr on his third line or his fourth line grinding away. I don't want to pigeonhole him. He could be like a Brian Rust type. Brian Rust, in fact, and Kevin Kerr have a lot of similarities, including the fact they look pretty darn good with a beard when they do like to go that route. Kerr, perhaps a little bit shorter in stature, but it doesn't really matter when you're playing a sport like hockey. In fact, closer to the ice can be an advantage in that way. And I don't care what you think about soccer and the level of physicality therein. It's more than you might think if you haven't played the sport. But Kerr could take a body check too, and he could dole him out. He's one of the tougher Pittsburgh pro athletes out there. So Kevin Kerr to hockey, flying down the wing, maybe with Crosby, maybe with Malkin, maybe with Derek Brassard or Riley Cheyenne as his centerman. You could do a lot worse than that. So again, looking for your input on that subject. Who's your Pittsburgh pro athlete that would do the best in crossing over? Crosby almost feels like cheating after last night and after we've seen his various exploits with the puck in the air. It looks like a natural translation to the batter's box in baseball, and the way he gets down low and uses his legs, I guarantee he has a lot of range, whether it be at second base or shortstop or third base. And I don't know about his throwing arm. That's the only unknown for Sid, but you're talking about all-around athletes. He's up there with anyone in pro sports currently. Okay, let's take a break here on Gike's Got Game. You are listening and or watching. You can do both at the same time. I do that sometimes. Put it on the laptop, get some work done while it's in the background. One of your many tabs open on your browser. No matter how you're accessing the show, thank you for doing so. When I return, my brother in arms at piratesprospects.com, Alan Saunders, a frequent guest and sometimes guest host on this show. He will join me. We'll talk about that topic, which I have led off this week's program with. And also, we'll play Pirates Perception versus Reality as they try a take two at opening day in Detroit for starting the 2018 season that has what appears to be a record level of cynicism among the local fans. This is The River's Edge from Millvale, Pennsylvania.
Hey everybody, this is Nathan J. from the band Standard Broadcast. I'd like to invite you out to Pittsburgh's 3rd annual Indie Rock Fest, Saturday, April 14th at Cativo. Please join us, Standard Broadcast, with our friends Sunhound, There You Are, Bad Custer, Back Alley Sound, BB Guns, and Essential Machine. And this year we're also happy to have Jeremy Kaywood as the host and MC, who's going to be performing as well. Tickets are only $10, and 100% of the proceeds go to the independent musicians that are involved in the show. So please come on out and join us. Hope to see you there.
Welcome back to Millvale, Pennsylvania. This is The River's Edge. I'm high on the hill here, metaphorically speaking, maybe even, on this Friday morning. Gloomy as heck, isn't it? God, I'm glad it's not opening day in Pittsburgh for the Pirates. They'll have to wait until Monday for that. And afternoon baseball is fun, but not when it looks like this outside. It had been worse, at least in Detroit yesterday. They canceled opening day, postponed it more appropriately to move it up to this Friday afternoon. So if you're a Catholic like me, you're trying to get your ducks in a row regarding Good Friday services and all that, but it is a very good Friday if you're a baseball fan. So how about that? Little segue for you. Here to talk about baseball and other things, Pittsburgh crossover athletes, like I discussed in the opening segment of the show, is my good friend Alan Saunders, my colleague at Pirates Prospects, in addition to being a frequent guest on this program and a frequent guest host. In fact, he's the most frequent guest host. So congratulations on that honor, Alan. First of all, I'm sure you're feeling good about it.
Yeah, it's Gunk's got game and sometimes not Gunk.
Sometimes not me, but you do have game. And, you're teasing a thought you had on your Pittsburgh crossover athlete that I may not have mentioned in the opening segment. So go ahead and fire away if you do have that. Oh, we have dropped the call. Alan is no longer with us. I'm going to have to vamp for a little bit here. I'll try to make the call. This is really the how the sausage is made here. I apologize to Tyler Zelenko. He had to scramble there.
We lost each other there for a moment.
Yes, you are back, and we're live on the air, so we'll just continue on like that never happened.
It didn't happen. I don't know what you're talking about.
Exactly. Okay, sorry about that. Who's your crossover athlete that you feel like you may have me stumped on here? You gave me good heads up, so I got to think about this, and I think my pick is I guess now former Pitt cornerback Avonte Maddox. Oh, you went with the college route. I wasn't anticipating that. Okay,
he's going to be entering the NFL draft here, so only a Pitt cornerback for another month or so. But Avonte was a pretty good cornerback, a little bit undersized, but good quickness. Ran a sub 4.40 at Pitt's Pro Day, so certainly has a good amount of speed. And he was a pretty good high school baseball shortstop. He was recruited a bit as far as baseball goes coming out of high school and decided to pick football. But he's really passionate about the game of baseball. He's actually appeared as a color analyst for a couple of Pitt's baseball broadcasts for the Pitt baseball team.
Okay.
And so I just think the combination of the speed, I'm sure he's going to have a good glove. I've seen some video clips of him taking batting practice. Never seen him try to hit a breaking ball. But I think at the very least you would get a Billy Hamilton type player out of him with some solid defense at short, and certainly enough speed to be an NFL cornerback. That's probably good enough to play some baseball.
Okay,
so I think that's my answer.
I like it. I didn't think of Josh Bell, but when I recall Mike Tomlin coming down to Pirates spring training a couple of years in a row, he would always remark, wow, look at the shoulders on that guy. I could put him to use somewhere on the football field. I believe Bell did play a little bit of football coming up in Texas, or maybe he didn't. I'm stumbling over his story. Do you recall him ever talking about that? I know you've spoken to him many times.
I don't think he ever played football, which is amazing considering
I know, right?
just his physical build and the fact that he grew up in Texas of all places is pretty phenomenal. There's a couple other. Jordy Mercer played high school basketball and apparently was pretty good. I don't know where his future would have lied if he went down that road. The interesting things to me are sort of, if you think about the specialists, right? Like, could a Riverhound be a place kicker, or could a place kicker play soccer? Or something of that nature. And certainly anyone that's fast can be, like a pinch running type baseball player. But I think the thing that really stands out to me is that when you try to do this and you try to take someone that has sort of like a mainline role and you try to think about them in a mainline role in a different sport, it's really, really hard to come up with anybody that makes any sense at all.
I really do think Sidney Crosby, if he took like a year to train, I think he could actually make some noise in pro baseball. I honest to God believe it, just because of how elite his hand-eye coordination is and how good of an athlete he is all around. But
he'd be better than Tebow. Yeah,
he wouldn't be a star or anything like that, but he could be a utility infielder, maybe I don't want to take away from his power. We've seen him hit a home run at PNC Park, but that's batting practice. Every major leaguer can hit a home run in batting practice. Maybe more of a slap hitter, line drive type of guy. I'm not sure he'd be part of the launch angle revolution that's going through baseball. He's got a
powerful lower half. That's what you need.
He does have that.
To turn on. I mean, you look at a guy like Jordan Luplow, hit like 26 home runs, I think, last year. I mean, he's not physically any bigger than Sidney Crosby is. It's all about bat speed. It's all about how you're able to get your weight into your swing. I don't know. I mean, he's certainly the kind of freak of nature that could do something like that, but it does take a really, really special athlete to even sort of entertain the notion.
I think Chris Letang could play soccer. I was considering that. Just with his cardiovascular ability, that seems... He practically plays soccer out there anyway because he's going up and down the ice like maybe a winger would be in soccer, like what we want to call him, a fullback, or you want to call it a defender who plays the wing position, or even a midfielder in that way. I've often thought of him as as someone who could transition in that way, and he plays half the game, so it's not like it would be any kind of additional taxing exercise for him in that way. He's pretty spectacular there. I thought Kevin Kerr could play hockey. He could play winger. I was talking about that in the opening segment. Jamie Alexiak, with his frame, you think about a lot of things. Football, I guess, primarily there. But Jordy Mercer might be the biggest crossover athlete from the Pirates, or I don't know, Starling Marte.
Dovydas Neverauskas played soccer growing up in Lithuania.
Oh, okay.
And I could definitely see him as like a sort of center back kind of, he's probably 6'4", 6'5", big frame. I could see him being kind of a tough defender. He's got the personality for it too. I think that goes along with it. You need somebody that kind of, I think you could take someone that's a player in a certain kind of sport, and that personality fits what they're doing. And maybe you go to a sport with a different sort of character. Maybe they don't kind of fit. But I think you could certainly see a guy like Dovydas playing soccer. As far as and Bell and Mercer, I guess there's some other good athletes on the Pirates. Like I think Josh Harrison has he brings a football mentality to baseball. I'm not sure he has the size to play a specific position. Like I feel like he could be a kind of a undersized running back, kick returner type. Certainly has elusiveness. We've seen that from him. I think that anytime you have someone that's a really high level athlete, you can carve out a role where you say, okay, maybe he could do, or she could do this very specific thing. It's hard to imagine though many players being truly good players at a different sport.
I think you nailed Josh Harrison on the football field. He would definitely be a kick returner or a punt returner or a running back. You hit out of the backfield maybe with a dump off pass, and you just try to get him to make some defenders miss. Anyway, good fun on this topic. a good place to start for sure with this interview. And now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty stuff with the Pirates. Alan, you wrote something on Pirates Prospects about the perception of the team from the outside and what the team themselves, what the team members themselves and Clint Hurdle and really everyone involved feels about their prospects here in 2018. I'm not sure I've experienced in this decade less enthusiasm for the Pirates going into a season. It seems like it's not even happening a lot of times. And when you and I were down in Bradenton, it's very easy to forget how far from the front of mind the Pirates have been up here, or at least among the general Bucco fan base. But when you look at where people think the Pirates might finish, where they're projected to finish, and where they might be able to overperform, where do you land on that? What do you think is more likely to happen? That this team overachieves and surprises, or that it lives down to the expectations that so many fans have for it?
I think a lot of people are going to be really surprised by the Pittsburgh Pirates. And, I don't think that they're necessarily a playoff team, but I just feel like the general perception is so negative and so far down. And I think that they're in a better. I think they're in a position right now to be a better team than they were last year, and I feel pretty strongly about that. And I think the players. It's been interesting. It was interesting trying to get the players to talk about that story because, on one hand, I don't think they want to say, "Yeah, we're better without Andrew McCutchen and Garrett Cole." Like that sounds ridiculous, but
it does. Yes, on the surface.
But if you look at the way they played last year. Garrett Cole didn't have a great season. Andrew McCutchen was okay, but he wasn't an all-star. And then Gregory Polanco and Starling Marte had terrible seasons. And then, you had Jameson Taillon have cancer. You had 3 or 4 rookie pitchers. Josh Bell, Adam Frazier, these guys getting in the lineup was on a regular basis for the first or second season. And it's really easy to look at the team and be like, yeah, hey, that bad stuff that happened last year probably isn't going to happen this year. All these young guys are a year better and a year older. They got a really important piece back in Corey Dickerson and a couple more in Colin Moran and Joe Musgrove. So it's not like those guys left with nothing coming in return. And it's really easy, I think, once you get in the team and you kind of get in that team's bubble, or Clint Hurdle used the word vacuum, it's really hard to be in that and feel negative because it's just there's so much potential there to be so much more than they were last year, even with the loss of Garrett Cole and Andrew McCutchen. And I think it's going to be kind of a surprise to a lot of people when this team comes out and they're not terrible. In fact, it might be better than they were last year. And I think it's going to be very interesting because I think a lot of the anger, if they get off to a quick start, I think a lot of that anger is going to dissipate fairly quickly. And they certainly have the ability to do that.
Well, we saw it in 2013. That might be a really good comparison point, actually, for this offseason because 2012, you'll recall, the Pirates were playing well through the middle of August, in fact, and then utterly collapsed. It was the 20th consecutive losing season. They got no hit by Homer Bailey at PNC Park down the stretch. It felt like from 2012 to 13, Alan, at least from my perspective, that the Pirates were literally never going to win again. It was just not going to happen. And then they win 94 games in the regular season in 13. So they don't have, this year's team does not have that obvious star in his prime like the 13 team did with Andrew McCutchen. And of course, it's so tough to project individually or even as a team how many wins they're going to pick up. I do agree with you. I think they're going to have more than 75 wins, which is what they finished last year with. I think they'll have more than 78 wins, which is what they had in 2016. The issue with me comes down to, as I wrote for Pirates Prospects yesterday, the veteran core here is not anything that's going to blow you away. You trade McCutchen and Cole, both of whom were maybe average performers last year, but Josh Harrison, Jordy Mercer, Ivan Nova, Francisco Cervelli, by at least a couple of measures, sabermetrically speaking, they are almost the definition of Major League average. And you can win with a whole bunch of average if you have some above average guys, but to me that puts a lot of pressure on Marte and Polanco, who have had trouble following through on their potential, and also that young rotation, that young starting rotation I'm talking about, led by Taillon and Cool and Williams, and of course we're going to see Joe Musgrove to start the season. So if we're talking about a surprise, yeah, I think they could win more than 80 games, but I struggle to go into serious wild card territory. What do you have to say about that premise from my angle?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of broke that down on the site. I guess it was on Wednesday. What I felt like needed to happen in order for them to get near that 87 win mark, which is typically where you've had to be to make a wild card appearance. And I think I don't think this team, as it's currently constructed, could get there. But I think this team could get close enough that, as you know, it gets close to that trade deadline in July. If they're only a game or two out, or if they're in wild card position at that time, then maybe Neil Huntington could make the kind of trades that would add to this club and get them over the top. But it's going to be really hard. And I think the bigger thing is yes, I think for them to have that kind of season, I think Starling Marte has to be an all-star. I think Jameson Taillon has to be one of the best young pitchers in the National League. But I think maybe more importantly, and kind of to your point, is that no one can afford to really have a bad year.
Yep. That's the tough part.
When you're a lot of average, you can win with like 2 or 3 really good players and then like 6 or 7 or 10 or 12 average ones. But if your rotation is Jameson Taillon and like 4 guys that are going to hover around 4 ERAs, and your lineup is Starling Marte and 7 guys that are going to be between 105 and 95, weighted runs created plus or OPS plus or whatever you want to, then if one of those guys just has an uncharacteristically bad season, it shoots a hole in the whole thing. And there are a lot of places in this team where if that happens, it's really bad. I think one of them is in the back end of the starting rotation. I personally feel like Chad Cole is not going to be a consistent pitcher, but I think he can certainly be good enough to stay in the starting rotation. I think Joe Musgrove has enough stuff to like junk his way to success, even if his fastball isn't playing as well as it did when he was a relief pitcher. But like, there's not a ton of confidence in them being anything above average. And so if those things don't work out, then they're going to come in well below average. And, I think Stephen Brault is pretty well average as a first replacement. Tyler Glasnow is a huge wild card. If he can pitch like he pitches in the minor leagues, like he pitched in spring training, he can be one of the best pitchers on the team. If he pitches like he did last year, he'll be the worst pitcher on the team. So I mean, that's
quite the variance, isn't it? Yeah,
it's pretty significantly variable there. But so I think that's the bigger thing, is that nobody, young player, old player, veteran, rookie, nobody can go out there and massively underperform their expectations. There just isn't enough ability from the other places to move forward to make up for it. There aren't enough guys that can be one win, one WAR better than their projection to afford for too many people to be one WAR less than their projection.
Right. So they're on the high wire here. I don't think there's any disputing that they need a lot of things to go right to be in the wild card picture. But I think there is also a definite floor to this team that will keep them from being in the basement of the National League Central. I don't know if they'll be able to stay ahead of, say, the rising Brewers, who at least appeared to be rising last year. We'll see how they follow up on an interesting season in 2017. But the competition is the Cubs primarily, and then secondarily you'll have the Cardinals, who just always seem to get the most or get a lot out of their ability. Now, last year they fell off a bit. There's some frustration in St. Louis, but that's all relative to their consistent level of success over the past 2, 3, 4, 5 decades. It seems like. You're listening to Geiks Got Game, or you're watching it on Facebook Live. Thank you for doing either or both, as I mentioned at the same time. It is possible. Alan, let's take a Twitter question here from Alexia21. He says, I'm excited about this team. I am unexcited about how management has treated its fans. There is some real talent on this roster. I worry that if they are putting together a nice season, that it will be dismantled throughout the summer. I don't know if I have that concern or I believe that will happen, but they also, the Pirates and Neil Huntington in particular, hasn't shown a willingness to stretch. If they're, say, 3 games out of a wild card in early July, that doesn't seem to have inspired him in recent years to make a move, to make an addition. But then again, when they have been in a firm playoff position in 13 and 14 and 15, he's also waited and hasn't made a big splash move. I don't know if there's anyone to dismantle here outside of, Jordy Mercer, who's a pending free agent?
I mean, I think if things are going poorly, then that whole veteran crew that you kind of named certainly would all end up on the block, I would think. I mean, if they're...
if it's bad, yeah.
If it's the 4th of July and they're 10 or 15 games, if they're 10 games below 500 even, I think Cervelli, Harrison, Nova, Rodriguez, Freese, Mercer, I would think that all those guys could go at that point. On the other hand, if they're like 2 or 3 games out, I mean, I don't really think that any of those players, maybe it's Francisco Cervelli's playing really, really well, and the Pirates look at it as an opportunity to hey, we could get out from underneath this contract that a year ago didn't look like that was ever going to be a possibility. Maybe they could make a move like that. But I just don't see, there's nobody that's making so much money that they would just need to get it off the books. There's no albatrosses there. Maybe, like I said, outside of Cervelli's contract being a bit high for the amount of games he's been able to play. So I don't really see an itchy trigger finger to move a lot of those guys, move on from a lot of those guys. And I do think the organization sees serious value in having veteran players to bring along their young players and not try to rebuild by calling up the entire AAA team at once. I don't think that Clint Hurdle thinks that works. I think that they feel like they need some presences in that clubhouse. But yeah, I mean, a guy like Jordy Mercer, who's a free agent and probably not coming back one way or the other, although he's also a guy that they could extend. And I think it depends a lot on how the first couple months go for the Kevins, Newman and Kramer in AAA. And, is there a quick replacement available? I mean, I think if one of those guys is hitting 300, it probably looks like that would be the road they would go for 2019. But, yeah, I don't see anybody. There's certainly no at this time last year, you could kind of see the writing on the wall when it came to Garrett Cole and Andrew McCutchen. I guess I don't really see that to the same extent this year.
So there you have it. It looks like you will have a core of young to youngish players to pull for if you are a Pirates fan this year. It's just a matter of how well they will perform, and the pressure is on the young players, the prospects and the former prospects, like your Martes and Polanco especially. The guy's got to deliver here at some point if this team is going to go where it wants to go. You can find plenty of Pirates coverage at piratesprospects.com. It is a subscription site. We do have some free stories on there, but overall, we'd love to have you join the group. Tim Williams heads up the operation there, I think going into his 10th or 11th season doing this thing. And Alan Saunders and I will be splitting up the Major League coverage. We'll be teaming up for the home opener on Monday, doing all the home games at the very least. We'll be there, and we'll have a feature for you every day on Pirates Prospects. And as always, we'll be talking to Alan throughout the rest of the springtime, not just about baseball, but also about the Penguins. No real hockey talk today. Next week will be the time to really dig into what the playoffs might hold. But here in this crossover season, I think we got to quite a bit. So thank you, Alan. And we'll look for you on Twitter as well, @Saunders_PGH. Happy viewing today on opening day. I'll see you at PNC Park on Monday.
Yeah, just real quick, 10% off today for opening day.
There you go.
Prospects.com. Promo code, look for it on social media. And also, I wanted to briefly mention the passing of longtime Pirates official scorekeeper Tony Krizmanic. I know that you, as someone that's been in that press box, Tony was just an institution there. Truly a guy that cared about the game deeply, took his job very seriously, and was a very friendly guy and well liked amongst the whole crowd. So very sad. Somewhat sad opening day for me yesterday to find out that Tony had passed. And I just wanted to share that with the listeners, and we'll be thinking of him on Monday for sure.
one of those guys that if you're not in the media, you probably don't know him very well at all. But if you are in the media, you just say Tony Krizmanich, and you could summon up all of his mannerisms and his ways of describing the action on the field. Base it. I'll say that before we go on Geica's Got Game. Final segment coming up. That was Alan Saunders. I am Matt Geica. I'm live at Millvale, in Millvale, at Mr. Small's Theater, if I can get my prepositions sorted out on this Friday morning. Hey, I'm still waking up sometimes when we go on. Coming up, I'll kill a cliche and also talk about another thing that happened in hockey yesterday that I have never seen before. Be with you in just a moment on the River's Edge.
Dun, dun, da, 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 dun, dun, da, 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 da. It's 2017. We've cleaned shit up here in Pittsburgh. Something that the governor has done that is just, it's got me giddy. I want money from Hempfield. That's what I want. Give us your cash. But why would you put trees up in front of a restaurant that views the river? If I'm going to a river viewing restaurant, I want to actually view the river. Am I crazy?
Catch River Talk with Brian Crawford, Mondays at 10 a.m. here on the River's Edge.
This is the real shit, folks.
Hello, we are back. And we, being me, and also my producer here, Tyler Zelenko. Say hi to Tyler if you're watching on Facebook or on our website. riversedgepgh.com/live is where you can find the video stream. The audio stream is running 24/7. This is a new kind of radio. I like to call this a new kind of sports talk as well. It certainly is different from probably most things that you do here. I don't have to be privy to getting out on the half an hour or playing a whole bunch of ads, although we would maybe enjoy some ads at some point, but you know what I mean. It's been fun to stretch my legs on this show, and it is almost each and every week when I'm able to make it into studio. That's when it's really fun here at Mr. Small's Theater. As you heard from Alan Saunders in our previous segment, the Pirates are definitely making the playoffs. They're winning the World Series, and they're the best team in baseball. No, if you want to go back and listen to that, we'll have that available in podcast form. Actually, if you're watching on Facebook, you can go back and rewind via our Facebook Live platform that we do use for this. Not that we're endorsing anything Mark Zuckerberg does, but hey, his platform is rather handy for live streaming. So I'm not going to apologize for that. We're going to take advantage of that, the fact that he does make that free. But as I said, the audio stream is where we make our money here. It's where we hang our hat, our collective hat. So many people involved here at the River's Edge. One more time, riversedgepgh.com. Pittsburgh station broadcasting from a Pittsburgh neighborhood here in Millvale. I have some accounting to do, so to speak. And yeah, that was a bit of a turn of phrase because we did see an actual real-life accountant in net for the Chicago Blackhawks last night. You may not know this, but NHL teams, or every home team, has the responsibility of setting up an emergency goaltender, someone who is to be the backup to the backup for both teams. He could have played for the Blackhawks last night in Chicago. He could have played for the Winnipeg Jets, who were the visitors, if the visitors needed a goalie. Now, if both teams go through two goalies in a game, then, wow, I don't know what you do there. Maybe literally pull someone out of the stands and strap pads to them. But there's nothing like this, literally nothing like this in any other sport, where you could go from corporate America, like this, I don't want to call him a young man, but Scott Foster, 36-year-old former college goalie, whose last game for Western Michigan more than a decade ago was against Robert Morris, in fact, and Bobby Moe lit him up for 4 goals on 7 shots. So last night, though, Scott Foster saw real live bullets for the first time since that game against Robert Morris last decade, and he stopped 7 out of 7 against the Winnipeg Jets. He stopped Dustin Byfuglien, he stopped Paul Stastny, both former All-Stars, and he stopped one of the better goal scorers in the league in Patrick Laine off of a wrist shot from the left circle. I don't know how much the Jets were, really pushing in that spot. They were down 6-2, but to stop NHL shooters in an NHL game when you're literally coming off the street, and check out Mark Lazarus's coverage of that event for the Chicago Sun-Times. You can find him on Twitter, and of course, so many tweets from NHL reporters who were in the building and the Chicago Blackhawks themselves. What an awesome story. Scott Foster. I talked about Sidney Crosby delivering a moment that I'd never seen before, a literal baseball swing off your own rebound to win a game in overtime. Well, I'd never seen that play out before. It has happened before. The emergency goalie has come into play when, like what happened with the Blackhawks, both goalies get hurt over the course of the game. But it's so charming, isn't it? It has that old-timey sports feel that so often does not happen anymore. There's all these fail-safes, and these sports are so professionalized, as they should be, with so much money on the line and with so much at stake, both emotionally and financially. But in this case, you can still get a player, a person who's just playing rec league hockey down the road to enter a game. And, well, yes, all you rec league goalies in the Pittsburgh area, contact the Penguins. They might be looking for a third goalie for a certain amount of games. Scott Foster said after last night's game that he has been the emergency backup for, I want to say, 10 to 15 this season. So teams do tend to spread that out. And if you are a goalie, much like if you're a goalie for a pickup game here in the Pittsburgh area or elsewhere, goalies are always welcome. Goalies play free, so I know the equipment's expensive, but if you do get into that discipline, then you can be on the privileged list in more ways than one. Not just playing free hockey around the region, but also maybe, just maybe, a 1 in a million shot to get into an NHL game coming right off the street. And that leads me to my Kill the Cliche segment to wrap up today's show. You often hear in sports, I've never seen that before. Well, like I said, literally, you had two things last night that I had never seen before. Or you say, well, that's unbelievable. The Scott Foster situation, pretty close to literally unbelievable. But in most cases, that expression is used for things that are quite believable. And well, maybe it would be a bad cliche to say it about Crosby. As Mike Sullivan said after the game last night, he's gotten used to that. And imagine what Sullivan has seen in practice. When I watch Crosby or other Penguins in practice or other players around the NHL, morning skates, you notice these little things that they do that make them elite at what they do. And the things that Crosby does around the net, he's become such a technician, such a scientist in that way, working on these things that maybe not would be terribly relevant for a lot of players, but with his hand-eye coordination, with his ability to like juggle the puck like we saw last week, I had literally never seen that before. The double volley goal, as I said, a soccer website referred it or classified it as. I thought that was the best classification that I heard of that goal against Montreal. And then last night, a full-on baseball swing at it. It's something else, and I've said it over and over again, but treasure these moments, Pittsburgh, for what you're watching does not come along very often. And Sid may not be the most dynamic player in hockey anymore. I think Connor McDavid has surpassed him in that way. McDavid combines all the attributes of Sid, or what Sid had back when he was a late teen coming in, but also with reach and maybe even more speed if that's possible. But Sid has just refined his game to such a sharp edge in so many ways, and now he's inventing ways to score. So the cliche, that's unbelievable. I've never seen that before. In this case, it does come into play very often, like we saw last night in hockey, whether it be Scott Foster getting on the ice in Chicago after taking more than a decade hiatus from competitive play at a high level, or Crosby doing things that we've never seen before. Those are the cases where you can use it, and it is not a cliche. But in other ways, as people in the sports media, as fans, let's be clear. Usually when we say that stuff, that's unbelievable, we've never seen that before, we actually have seen that before, or we actually could believe it. So let's just savor those moments where it really does come into play. And it did come into play, during the same hour of play in the NHL on Thursday, March the 29th. That's the end of Geike's Guy Game for this Friday, March the 30th, 2018. I am Matt Geika. Thank you again to Alan Saunders for joining me for the middle segment, talking some crossover Pittsburgh sports athletes. Still looking for more from you on Facebook and Twitter in that regard, and also perception versus reality with the Pirates. For Tyler Zelenko here in studio, for Brian Crawford, wherever he may be, the founder of the Feast here at the River's Edge, this is Matt reminding you that when the radio fades, you know life's moving fast, and it sure is. Next time I talk to you, it'll be April. The Masters will be in full swing. Baseball will be a week old, and the hockey playoffs will be right around the corner. Can't wait. Talk to you then.